Welcome to this Getting Started video on estimating using a standard job template. In this video, I'll show you how to create an estimate in minutes using a quote template. We'll choose a template for the job from a wide range of house, bungalow, extension, garage and renovation templates. Then we'll enter the overall dimensions of the construction and specify the wall, roof and floors, etc. We'll review the dimensions and options for each element of the build, adding a structural opening, doors and windows. Finally, we'll have a look at what's going on under the bonnet of the quote template by opening up the walls and roof in the main estimate. Before you create your estimate, it's a good idea to update your prices using the Download Prices button in the Materials section of the Master Price Book. We'd also recommend checking and adjusting your labour rates in the Labour section of the Master Price Book. Your Master Price Book is located in the library, which you can find on the EstimatorXpress navigator on the left-hand side of the screen. From the dashboard, to create a new job using a standard job template, click Create New Job. There are 4 ways of creating an estimate in EstimatorXpress. You can estimate a typical job using a standard job template. If it's suitable for the type of work you're estimating, this is the quickest way of producing an estimate. You can use a custom job template to produce an estimate for renovation jobs or non-standard builds. You can import and take off plans from PlansXpress, or you can produce a custom estimate from scratch using estimating calculators. For most standard jobs, using a standard job template will be the quickest and easiest way of creating your estimate. Click the Quote from Standard Job Template option. The Quote Template library opens up. From here you need to select a template for your job. To help you find the most appropriate template, select a building type from the drop-down menu. I'm going to estimate an extension. An extension, by definition, is a new construction which connects to an existing building. When you select an extension template, EstimatorXpress will estimate the formation of the opening in the connecting wall of the existing building. It will also allow for the plastering and decoration of the connecting wall of the existing building, as well as the new extension. And of course it will estimate the construction of the new extension, including walls, roofs, doors and windows. You can use the Wall Finish drop-down menu to select different wall finishes. EstimatorXpress will automatically specify an appropriate wall type. We'll see this later on. Locate the template you want to use and click on it to select it. Now select a template setup. I'm going to use the traditional brick and block with cut roof for extensions setup. This will determine the wall and roof construction methods and also the type of slab. Now we're in the main quote template, we can specify each element of the building and check the various options and dimensions. First, enter the overall dimensions of the building into the quote template. As you make any changes to the dimensions, specifications and estimating options, the job cost at the top right of the screen will update. Now let's check the quote template options and key dimensions. I'm going to leave the options for plastering and decoration ticked. I'm going to untick the option for decoration to fascias and soffits, as I'm going to use PVCU fascias and soffits. I'm going to change the cavity wall foundation depth to 1.2 meters. Click into the input box and type in the appropriate dimension. The units are shown just here. You can press the Tab key to move along the input boxes, checking that you're happy with the default dimensions. You can press this button to adjust the standard settings. Changing the standard settings here will update the standard dimensions and options, which may impact on multiple elements of the estimate. As you can see, there are tabs for the different elements of the build. If you click Foundations, you'll see that the quote template is set to plan construct the excavations when they exceed 1 metre. We'll come back to this later. You can change any of these standard settings, and when you do so, the current quote template will be updated. Click Save as Defaults to save these default settings for any future jobs you create. In the next section, you can review the specification of the job. As this is an extension job, the extension specification has been selected by default, but you can always select an alternative specification if necessary. For example, if you set up your own specification, you can select it here. You can configure all of the specifications from the library. You can also refine your specification further by selecting mini-specs from the options below. Click the Edit Specification and Mini-Specs button to make changes. I'm going to stick with the extension specification for the main specification, but I'm going to select a 75p facing brick, pan tiles for the roof tiling, half-round guttering, and UPVC fascias and barge boards. You can leave some options set to the specification defaults. Once you're happy with your specification choices, click OK. The estimate will then be recalculated, and this time we can see that the job cost has decreased by £277. Now let's take a look at the external walls. As we selected the brick finish in the template selection window, brick and block cavity walls have automatically been selected for the downstairs and upstairs walls. You can of course select a different wall specification at this point if you want to. For example, you could select a different wall finish for the upstairs walls, if for example you wanted half render. You can see the wall and cavity widths here, and change them if necessary. Let's take a more detailed look at the downstairs wall dimensions by clicking the Dimensions button. The total wall length has been calculated from the building dimensions we entered into the quote template. The wall height comes from the ceiling height also entered into the quote template. As you can see, the input boxes are colour-coded. A green input box indicates that the data comes from the quote template. This information can be overridden, but you must be aware that you'll then be responsible to ensure it's correct. A yellow input box indicates that the data has been set to a certain value by EstimatorXpress. This data shouldn't normally be changed. If we click onto the foundation details, you'll also see a pink input box. A pink input box indicates that the data comes from the standard settings. You should consider opening the standard settings and changing the setting there, as it may affect multiple parts of the estimate. Hover your mouse over an input box for a reminder of where the data comes from. As you can see, the foundation depth here is 1.2 metres, as the external walls have picked up the foundation depth that we set up in the quote template. And as per the standard settings, because the foundation depth exceeds 1 metre, EstimatorXpress has added planking and strutting to the estimate. Finish reviewing the foundation details, then take a look at the footing details. Switch on the tech labels to help you understand the diagrams. You can also switch on the tech tips, which display a handy description of what you need to enter in the top right of the window. Click Next, and finally review the plastering and decoration options. Once you're happy with the wall specification, click Finish. Tick Completed to show that you've reviewed the external walls. Now let's look at the floors. A ground-bearing extension slab and an insulated timber floor have been specified by default. You can select a different specification from the drop-down boxes, say for example you wanted an insulated timber floor. You can quickly update the thickness of the slab from here. Let's take a look at the slab dimensions in more detail. You can see that EstimatorXpress has calculated the total area of the slab just here. It uses the key dimensions entered into the quote template, taking into account whether it's a suspended or a ground-bearing slab. As you can see, the thickness of the slab has been updated here. You can change it in either place, in the quote template or the dimensions wizard. Check you're happy with all of the estimating options. And finally, review the plant allowances for the job. Once you've done that, click Finish. Next, let's look at the roof. EstimatorXpress has specified a cut roof, as we selected a cut roof template setup. If you selected a truss template setup, EstimatorXpress will automatically specify a truss roof. The internal finish is currently set to plaster and insulate the flat ceiling. Of course, you could select a different option, such as plastering and insulating the rafters, if desired. Let's take a look at the dimensions of the roof. All of the dimensions here are highlighted in green, showing that they're based on the dimensions we entered into the main quote template. For example, EstimatorXpress has calculated the clear span of the roof based on the width of the building and the thickness of the external walls I've chosen. Dimensions such as the joist centres and the rafter centres should be updated in the standard settings. EstimatorXpress has even estimated the length of rainwater pipes required. You'll see that sarking board is also an option in the standard settings. If you use sarking board as standard, set this option to yes in the roof section of the standard settings, and then click the Save as Defaults button. Once you're happy with the roof finishes, click Finish. And that's the roof done. Now let's add some structural openings. Select the option to add an opening to an existing wall. As we're estimating an extension, EstimatorXpress will allow for the formation of the opening in the connecting wall of the existing building. I'm going to select the dimensional template for a structural opening for a small opening. Type in the number of openings you need. I need one of these openings downstairs and one of these openings upstairs. If you have multiple identical openings, you can enter 2 or more here. Now the dimension wizard pops up, so we can check the dimensions and options for the structural opening. I'm happy with an opening which is 2.4 metres wide, but you can adjust the opening size here if you need to. I want pad stones at either end of the lintel, so I'll leave that set to yes, and leave the number of bricks set to 0. EstimatorXpress has set the reveals to be plastered and painted as we tick the plastering and decoration options on the quote template. That's all fine, so click Finish. Now EstimatorXpress has assumed that we're forming the opening in the existing connecting wall of the existing building. If the opening is going into a different existing wall, select the other option from the drop-down box. So that's the structural opening sorted. Now let's look at the plastering to the connecting wall. As we're estimating an extension, which by definition joins an existing building, we need to plaster and decorate the connecting wall on the internal side of the existing wall and also the external side. EstimatorXpress will automatically plaster, decorate and skirt the wall according to the selected specification, taking into account any structural openings. So on the internal side, I'm going to select the option to reskim the existing wall and replace the skirtings, both for downstairs and for the upstairs. And on the external side, I'm going to select the option to plaster and skim on battens without insulation. And again, I'll apply that specification to the downstairs and the upstairs walls. EstimatorXpress uses the wall area from the quote template dimensions to estimate these tasks. Now let's add a bifold door to the extension. Click on the External Doors drop-down menu. If you've got the downloaded Crystal Direct bonus pack, you can choose to add doors from their catalogue. For now I'm going to select the option for templated bifold doors. And I'm going to use the 3600 5-panel door. As with the structural openings, you need to say how many there are downstairs and how many there are upstairs. In this case there's just the one downstairs. If you add the wrong door or decide to use a different one, you can always delete the door using the delete button here. I'm happy with that for now though. You can add windows in exactly the same way. Again, you can select a window from the Crystal Direct catalogue. Let's select the templated PVCU windows this time. I'm going to use the 312C 1800 by 1200 window this time. Once again, enter the number you need downstairs and upstairs. I need just the one upstairs. Notice that you can add heads, brick arches and sills to your windows using the top treatment and bottom treatment drop-down boxes here. Finally, let's add wall starters to the estimate. You can do this in the Walling Sundries section. You can use the Jump to Section tool to quickly navigate to a section of the quote template. The Jump to Section drop-down box can be found at the top of the screen. I'm going to locate and click on the Walling Sundries section. Walling Sundries appears at the top of the screen. Click Add Estimating Calculators. Scroll down to the bottom of the list and you'll see that there are options to estimate toothing in and wall starters. Let's use wall starters. Select the appropriate height of wall. For speed, I'm going to enter the total length of wall starter required. I'm going to assume the overall wall height is 5 metres and there are 4 leaves to connect, so that comes to 20 metres. Let's allow, say, 4 hours to fit the wall starters. Once you're happy, click Finish. You can of course add plumbing and electrics to your quote. You can estimate by component type, for example radiators, or by groups of items, for example plumbing for a bathroom. If you jump to the Rooms tool, you can also add room renovation tasks. Using the Rooms tool, you can enter the room dimensions, then select the items or tasks you want to estimate for each room. See the help video on adding rooms for more information. You can also add preliminaries and sundry costs to your estimate using the Preliminaries and Sundries section. Click Add Estimating Calculators to add items such as planning and design costs, scaffolding, site acquisition, and site establishment. You can also add subcontract quotations using the Subcontract Quotations section of the quote template. If you need to add other projections to your building to create bespoke building layouts, click the Add Additional Template button. See the video on adding additional templates for more information. For now, let's click Main Estimate on the navigator to take a look at the estimate. We're now looking at the Job Overview screen. EstimatorXpress has produced an estimate by combining the dimensions from the quote template with the job specification, mini-specs and individual specifications you've chosen for each element of the job. You can return to the quote template at any time by clicking on the navigator on the left of the screen. If we click on the Estimating Calculators tab, we can see a breakdown of each component of the extension. Let's take a look at the brick and block cavity wall. Let's open up the External Walls worksheet to take a closer look at the dimensional output. You'll see that we've got one column here for the downstairs walls. We can see the length of the wall, the height of the wall, and the total area of any window and door openings. We can also see the foundation and the footing details for the downstairs walls. When you've created your estimate using a quote template, the dimensions are locked down in the estimating calculator. If you want to make any changes to the dimensions or estimating options, return to the main quote template and make the changes there. Click on the Calculated Resources tab. From here you can take a closer look at the material, labour and plant resources which have been specified, and their quantities and costs. Here you can see, among all the other items, the bricks and blocks which have been specified. So here you can see the 75p facing bricks that we've specified. If you want to modify the specified resources, or rates of production, we suggest that you make these changes in the job specification, which can be found in the job settings on the navigator. The job specification is the best place to make changes to specified resources and rates of production, as some tasks appear in multiple places in the estimate. If you make the changes in the job specification, you'll only have to make the changes once. Of course, you should also check your labour and plant costs in the job price book, which can be found in the job settings. Click Main Estimate to return to the Main Estimate screen. Now let's take a quick look at the apex roof. Click on the apex roof to open it. Now open the worksheet. You can see that the quote template has fed all of the dimensions into the estimate. Scroll down the screen to see all of the dimensions. To see a comprehensive roof cutting list, click Filter Material Quantities. EstimatorXpress has created a complete cutting list of all the timbers required for the job. Click Calculated Resources to take a look at the resources which have been specified for the roof. You'll see that the pantiles we selected have been specified, and further down, the half-round guttering and associated components. Take some time to explore the roof, or click Main Estimate to return to the Main Estimate screen. As you've seen, in no time at all, we've created a detailed and accurate estimate. Now let's produce a quote for the customer. Before you create the quote, you need to complete the client and site address details from the job settings. Click Job Settings on the navigator. Now click View and Edit Contact and Address Information. Type in the client name and address details. For an extension, you can then tick this box to show that the site address is the same as the client address. Once the address details have been completed, click Outputs. Click on the Open button next to Quote for Main Estimate. On the right-hand side of the quote, you can see the main settings for the quote. From here, you can decide whether you want the quote resources to be grouped by build phase, by estimating calculator, or location. For most jobs, the build phase option is most suitable. You can then decide which resource types you want to include in the quote. All resource types will be included by default. You can decide which aspects of the quote you want to include, and you can decide whether to add inflation to the quote. You can set the job inflation rates from the job settings. From here you can also set the VAT rate. At the moment it's set to add a percentage of 20%, but can be changed to a different percentage or to a fixed amount. You can also change the quote font settings from here. On the navigator on the left-hand side, you can navigate your way around the different parts of the quote. Click on the cover page. Now on the right-hand pane, you'll see we have cover page settings. You can import your own company logo onto the cover page. If you want to do that, tick the Include Logo tick box. Then browse the computer for your company logo image file. Once you've made a change to the settings, click the Apply Changes button. Now click on the quote letter on the navigator. From the letter settings, you can select a template letter from the drop-down box. We've provided a range of template letters, but you can create your own templates by clicking Copy, editing the text, and then saving the changes with the new name. You can also add your own company letterhead by ticking the Include Letterhead tick box. Now click Breakdown on the navigator. We now have a set of build phase settings on the right-hand pane. You can use these tick boxes here to show or hide the build phase pictures, and the same for the description. You can also decide whether you want to show the cost for each build phase. Further down, you can decide which build phases you want to include in the quote. Any build phases which aren't itemised in the quote will be grouped into the Additional Charges section. Scroll further down the build phase settings. You can decide which resources you want to show in the quote. You can decide to hide all of the resources, to show key resources, or to show all resources. Here you can decide whether you want to show the resource quantities. For an abbreviated quote, you could select Hide All Resources and leave out the order quantities. You can also choose whether you want to show friendly names. These are generic product descriptions which are more meaningful to the layman. Don't forget to click Apply Changes to see your changes in the quote. Scroll down the quote to see the different build phases. At the end of your quote, you'll find the acceptance forms and the terms and conditions. These sections can also be edited from the Quote Settings pane on the right-hand side of the screen. Once you're happy with the presentation of your quote, click Print. So there you have it. In a matter of minutes, you've priced your job and created a professional-looking quote to impress your customer. Give it a go and see how much time you could save.